In the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to tonight's pre-application information meeting for the Our Water program. My name is Rakia Nance, and on behalf of the Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works, I welcome you to this meeting and thank you for your interest. Right now, I'd like to hand the meeting over to Kiana Ray from the Department of Public Works, who will introduce some of the folks that you'll be hearing from this evening. I do want to mention that tonight's meeting is being recorded, and it will be made available on the Rolling Knolls community page. We'll show you how to navigate to that page a little bit later. Kiana?
Thank you so much, Rakia. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kiana Ray. I'm going to go through introductions briefly, and then I will turn my camera off. So first we have Mr. Ron Briggerman. He is with Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works. We have Kim Cluey, she's from Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works. George Heiner, also of Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works. Julie Paluda, Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works. Myself, Kiana Ray, Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works. Brian Bialkinis, HDR. Tom Kuchaba, HDR, Rakia Nance, HDR, and Jessica Sneed, HDR. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiana. Tonight's meeting is being hosted on WebEx, and I know in this virtual environment there are several virtual meeting platforms, so I wanted to take a few moments to orient you with some of the features and functions of WebEx. Here you'll see the different icons and what they denote, and we will allow for pauses during the meeting for you to ask questions, but we also encourage you to use the chat function if you have questions during the presentation, and also the raise hand function. I'll be monitoring the chat to make sure that all of your questions are addressed in turn. If you have any issues hearing the audio, you can rejoin the meeting using the Call Me option. Over the next couple of hours, we've divided the content into 4 buckets. First, you'll hear about the Our Water program as a whole as it relates to Rolling Knolls. Then we'll discuss funding and costs, followed by the enrollment and development process. And then we'll discuss next steps and also have an extended time for questions and answers. I'm going to hand the meeting over to George Heiner with the Department of Public Works to begin the discussion on Our Water and Rolling Knolls.
Sorry, looks like I started out on mute, so thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I guess I'm still getting used to the virtual format. So we wanted to talk tonight about the Our Water program and our septic to sewer connection program. So broadly, you may have seen some announcements about Our Water. The Our Water program is an integrated program that the Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works has developed to really focus on a long-term strategy to improve the health of our waterways and the Chesapeake Bay. Go to the next slide. Can you forward to the next slide? Oh, there it is. Okay. So there's a number of different initiatives that we're doing. Oh, can you go back one? I'm sorry. Yeah. There's several different initiatives that are part of the Clean Water program. So, and they all are designed to really work together to help the county maintain long-term compliance with the nutrient loadings for the Chesapeake Bay. So you can see the 5 components here. This is septic to sewer connections. There's upgrades to small minor system treatment plants. There's the ongoing stormwater improvement projects and the stormwater program. There's efforts related to groundwater resiliency, and we have continuing improvements at our wastewater treatment plants. And tonight's focus is really on this top item, which is the septic to sewer connection program. And what we want to talk about tonight is the new changes that have been made to support septic to sewer connections and make them more affordable for homeowners. Next slide, please. So why is it important, or why is it helpful, or why is it beneficial to make a change from septic systems to the public sewer? The main reason is that the the traditional septic systems, the traditional conventional septic systems are not very effective at removing nutrient pollution. That's specifically nitrogen. And that's one of the major concerns with the nutrient total maximum daily loading, just the TMDL for the Chesapeake Bay. The county's wastewater treatment plants have been specifically designed and upgraded for nutrient removal processes. And so the typical treated discharge from one of our treatment plants is almost 90% less nutrient pollution than from a traditional septic system. So the more septic systems that we can get connected throughout the county, the greater the improvement to the overall water quality we believe we'll see. Next slide. So in the septic to sewer connection program, what the county has done, DPW, and with the support of the county council has passed these changes as well. We've developed the program to target higher impact septic system areas and make changes to make those projects more affordable for residents. And so in this map, you're seeing an area, I think the green are all the septic system areas. The blue are the highlighted sort of targeted areas in our septic to sewer connection program. There's close to 40,000 septic systems throughout the county. And our overall goal on this program is to see approximately 6,000 septic systems connected over the next 30 years. Can you go to the next slide? So we have basically a need, which is that we want to improve the protection to our waterways. We'd like to see more of these septic systems connected. The process that we've developed is a modification of the county's existing petition process. It really relies on the existing petition process. And as I just mentioned, the goal is 6,000 of the county's septic systems to be connected to public sewer over 30 years. So approximately 200 homes per year would be the goal. Next slide, please. So the county's been developing a septic to sewer connection program for several years now, and it really started as early as 2017 when there was a septic task force that was formulated, and that was held by DPW with representatives from different parts of the community, Anne Arundel County, to help develop input on policies, develop prioritization criteria, and also make suggestions for possible subsidies and legislative changes. The task force reformed in 2019 and 2020 with a little more specific focus on developing modifications to the county code to support the septic program. And those county code changes were enacted last year and into early this year, and then this year now we're rolling out the beginning of the program. Next slide, please. So with this slide, we're showing the eligible area. So if you've been to the Our Water site, you'll see that certain areas, you type in your address and it tells you whether you're in an eligible area or not. The eligible areas are really the targeted areas for the septic sewer connection program. And generally they're defined in the county code, and generally they're ones that are either on-site wastewater management problem areas, they're either high-density areas, or they happen to be areas that are close to existing county infrastructure. And the Rolling Knolls community is relatively close to existing county infrastructure, which is why it was an eligible area for the program. Next slide, please. So this is what we picture right now as a potential project area, and what we've included is sort of on the school side of General's Highway and up towards the water tower there. There's a sewer manhole at the water tower that was designed at a pretty good depth to be able to accept flow in the future, if that was something that was going to occur. And as we'll talk a little bit more about the process and the petition process, a project area is really defined by the community. This is the area that we're showing here is what we laid out when we were doing an engineering study that looked at the area, as an area that kind of made sense, but a project could be a smaller area than this. But generally, there are some areas that would have to be included depending on the engineering layout. Next slide. And so we wanted to take a quick pause and just see if there were questions on maybe our water program or any of the information that we've presented so far. The next few slides will start getting into the costs and what we think the cost might be for this area. So we just wanted to see if there were any general questions about our water program and the septic connection program. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to be handing this off to Brian Balchunas from HDR. HDR is a consulting firm that we've been working with in developing the Our Water program. They've been very heavily involved in helping us develop the costs and a lot of the information that we're going over tonight. And they also contributed to the septic task force discussion. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Brian.
Thanks, George. Good evening, everybody. So as George said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the costs, and I'm going to start pretty general and then transition to how the program that the county's doing can impact some of the costs to the individual homeowners, reduce some of those costs, and what it might mean for Rolling Knolls specifically. We have, based on that layout George just showed, or that area, we have some very preliminary cost numbers, some concept numbers. You'll see a pretty wide range, and George will talk a little bit later about the process and how we hone in on those costs and ultimately the assessments. So start off, in a built community like Rolling Knolls, a sewer project is a significant investment. You already have streets, you already have roads, you have other utilities around you, and the costs are really broken up into three buckets. You have the public side cost, the project cost, which is building the sewer in the right of way, any pump station that will be required, things of that sort to convey the sewage to the county's water reclamation facility. You have the private side costs, which are on your property. Those are the abandonment of the existing septic system, new piping to the clean out that the county will install to connect it. And then finally, there's a capital facility connection charge, and this basically pays for county infrastructure that's already in place. You'd be going to an existing wastewater treatment plant that has the capacity to treat the wastewater, and that's what that connection charge covers. So the cost, if you go to the next slide, Rick-Ann, the project cost, that public side cost, is what is the basis for an assessment. And the county's got lots of data on different projects and project costs. Major contributors are property size, bigger properties, more sewer has to be run, proximity to the existing system, how deep the sewers need to be, number of grinder pumps. In some areas that you have to pump from your house to get into the sewer collection system. If a pump station is required, how much road work, surface restoration is required, street closures, all of those things impact how the total project cost. The other thing is project costs are the cost of construction, but also the cost for engineering and administration and inspection and permits and everything that would need to be done to make a viable project. So looking at Rolling Knolls specifically, you're on the lower end of the average project cost per household because you don't need a pumping station is the big reason you're on that lower end. As George talked about, there was a sewer put in from the school, and that sewer has a manhole that is deep enough that all of the sewage from Rolling Knolls could drain by gravity, and there would not be a pumping station. So a little bit later, I'm going to translate what this means to an assessment and annual cost, but we'll get there in a bit. I did, on the next slide, want to touch on the private costs. So again, these are the costs on your property. The county has a pretty good database of historical private costs. And these are really impacted by the property size again, how far it is from, your basement or property, your house to the property line. So the distance from the home to the public right of way, your own topography, grade, hills on your property, and then if you would have significant property or driveway restoration. You will see about 80% of all private site costs are typically less than $8,000. But again, it really depends on these other factors. And there are programs to help pay for these as well, which I'll touch on. So before we get into the actual assessment, I just wanted to pause to see if there were any questions on the components of the costs of the project. Okay. So typically, go to the next slide, Ricky. Typically, before Anne Arundel County started our water program, if you wanted sewer in your neighborhood, you would have to petition to connect, and the homeowners would be responsible for 100% of those project costs and assessment for funding that connection. What happened with the Our Water program and the legislation that George talked about was there is a subsidy now that the state or that the county can offer, and that's really the intent of the program here is the process that George will talk about is to select areas that are eligible for this county subsidy which is up to 25% of the total project cost. And then we also, through this program, can help facilitate funding through what's called the Bay Restoration Fund. You all on septic properties now pay into the Bay Restoration Fund. People on public sewer pay into the Bay Restoration Fund. This was established several years ago by the state, originally to help pay for those wastewater treatment upgrades that George talked about to make the wastewater treatment plants remove nutrients better. But that program has continued, and funding is now available to use for projects like this for septic conversions. So after those two, then the remaining costs will be passed to the homeowner through an annual assessment. But that annual assessment would also take advantage of low-interest state loans to reduce the homeowner annual cost. So through the state, and we can apply for low-interest loans in a community such as Rolling Knolls that is large, through the program cycle, and those are typically much lower than the county's standard interest rate. Next slide. So the subsidy I'll touch on briefly. The subsidies are awarded, as George talked about, we're looking at 6,000 conversions over a 20 or 30-year period. So we're looking at a project the size of Rolling Knolls, one of those projects per year for the next 20 to 30 years. So that's where this application process comes in, where we will find out communities that might be interested. They would apply through the cycle that George will talk about now, and then the county would rank projects and select those that they can move forward with in that application cycle. And it's subject to available funding, but it was passed through the county council. And it's defined, there are some income limits for incomes less than $300,000 per year. It's up to 25% of the per property project cost. And for income greater than $300,000 per year, this is cut in half to 12.5%. Those numbers match the state Bay restoration funding and how they will contribute funds to projects. So this subsidy ultimately will reduce the assessment. The goal is to make things more affordable. Touch briefly on the Bay Restoration Fund. There's actually two different sources or available funds to draw from. One is the septic side, which can provide assistance with private site costs and or the capital facility connection charge. So that is money that what you would do is hire a plumber, get quotes for a plumber, hire a local plumber, and then the state would end up paying that plumber directly for the on-site work. This is administered through the health department, and that's where that data came from of those on-site private costs previously. Depending on same income levels that we just talked about, funding may be up to $20,000. And it's redone every fiscal year to make sure it's still fiscally responsible. And as I said, it's not directly provided to you, but it's paid to a plumber and to the county for that capital facility connection charge. There is also funding potentially available from the wastewater fund that could be used to lower the overall assessment as well. And I'll talk a little bit here in a minute on where those, how we assume those funds are applied to calculate the average assessments here. And so getting from kind of the construction cost to the assessment, so the construction costs are, what would happen is a study will be done and estimate the construction costs. But then as the project is bid and engineering is done, investigation, inspections, there's overhead at the county, all of that makes up the project cost. And then the net assessable amount is determined by taking those project costs. We would subtract out if part of the construction or project costs are related to future connections. We had to oversize the pumping station to allow for more homes to connect. Those will be deducted from the project costs. We subtract out the subsidy and state grants that might be applied to the assessment, and then add in the county incurred interest over the life of the project, and that determines the assessment. So the assessment is that assessable amount divided by the number of project households, and it's paid over a 40-year term. The county decided on adding the 40-year term instead of a traditional 30 to reduce the annual cost that homeowners would have to pay over the life of the assessment. So we're going to present some, on the next slide, we'll present some specific potential cost information for Bowling Knolls. Again, these are very preliminary and conceptual. You'll see a pretty wide range. Should you move forward, we narrow down those costs and those ranges as we develop them. But for this assumption, we assume that you as the property owners, homeowners, will get $15,000 from the state to pay off essentially the on-site cost plus that capital facility connection charge. So there should be no out-of-pocket money from you for the initial connection. And then that we would get another $5,000 per property from the state to lower the assessment. And then assuming the 25% subsidy. And then one last piece of this, which I haven't mentioned yet, is the option to defer. So also in the code changes was that homeowners could choose to defer portion of their assessment, and the deferral is 50% of the assessment. And being in an eligible area, you all would be eligible for that deferral. There always has been a deferral for 100% for elderly, low income, or permanently disabled. So some people may qualify for 100% deferment, and we'll touch on both of those here in a minute. And I touched on the BRF funding. So households that earn less than $300,000 a year get the full subsidy and the full state funding. Households with greater than $3,000 a year get half the subsidy and half the state funding. One last piece, the vacant lots would not receive any subsidy, deferment, or BRF. Vacant lots are responsible for paying their portion of the assessment, but obviously they would not have a connection charge because they have not connected. They would not have annual or quarterly sewer bills because they have not connected. So this graph kind of provides a range of potential costs to homeowners, and I'll go over each of these briefly. These costs include both the assessment, any financed capital facility connection charge, because that too can be financed, and includes an average water bill, which is about $35 a month, sewer bill for now your actual, because you already have water in this community, your water and sewer bill would be based on unit consumption charges, how much water you use. But we use the average here, which comes out to about $420 a year. So these yearly costs include all of those elements. And you can see if you just take the subsidy, again, we've bracketed a pretty wide range here based on that $48,000 per property cost. We think that the annual assessment could be from around $1,500 to $2,500. The annual cost, sorry, not the assessment, but again, this is total cost, between $1,500 and $2,500 a year. If you defer, you could lower that to just under $1,000 to just under $1,500 a year if you take the 50% deferment. If you take the 100% deferment, then it's just the cost of the water and sewer bill, which is, we again averaged about $400 a year. And then you can see the difference between the high income, there would be slightly more because you don't have that as much assessment. You're not getting as much money from the state. And then finally, the vacant is there, and a reminder that vacant would not include any usage charge or a connection charge. So again, these are a little bit of wide range. Happy to answer questions about how we calculated them, if there are, as we move forward. Just a couple more slides on cost, and then we can pause for questions. So if you do move forward, you would have some options. Again, on the private side costs, we talked about the BRF grants and having those available at the time of connection. The capital facility connection charge can use BRF grants. So the assumption is you'd use the BRF grants for your on-site costs first, and whatever you had left, you'd apply to the CFCC, and then any remaining CFCC can be financed over that 40-year period. And then the assessment options is an annual payment paid over 40 years. There's no option to pay it up front, really. You could, but it would still include the finance charges. So annual payment paid up over 40 years. And again, you have the ability to defer up to 50%. Anybody in the community would have that ability to defer up to 15%. The deferment is due at the sale of the property or at the end of the 40 years. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim Clooney from the county to explain a little bit more how that would work.
Hi. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. Okay, so to explain the partial deferral here. The partial deferral is available to all residential property owners in the project area, and it's the deferral of up to 50% of the per property assessment and capital facility connection charge if you're not paying that off with the BRF. So as an example, if the 40-year total assessment was $80,000, you could defer up to $40,000 of that, which would lower that annual payment from around $2,000 a year to $1,000 a year. This is subject to whenever you sell that property. If you sell that property before the 40 years, then that deferred amount of $40,000 would need to be paid upon the transfer of the property. Go ahead to the next one. This is a little bit different for the full deferral. The full deferral has been in effect for quite a while. But the full deferral of the assessment payment is available for disabled and elderly residents who meet certain eligibility requirements. This works a little bit differently in that you defer each annual assessment until the property is transferred, and then at the time that the property is transferred, the deferred payments would be due. And then the remaining assessment would be paid by the buyer, which happens in both cases, but it's a little bit different. So in this case, if it was $80,000 was your 40-year total assessment, you would be deferring the $2,000 a year payments. And then whenever the property is sold, you would sell however much of that you had deferred over those times. So if you had, deferred for 10 years, you would be paying back $20,000. But then the next homeowner would be paying that $2,000 a year for the remaining time of the 40-year term. All right, go ahead to the next one. I think this makes a little bit of sense when you see them side by side, just to kind of see how they're different. So in this one, we're using the same $80,000 assessment, but it's split up a little bit differently. So if you had the 100% elderly and disabled deferment, if you sold the house after 5 years, you would be responsible for paying off just the $10,000 of payments that would have been deferred. But if you had the 50% deferral, which everyone is eligible for, then you would be paying the $40,000 each, no matter when you sold it, if it was after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 20. All right. Are we supposed to, I think we should have questions here, or are we going forward?
We can pause for questions. Is anything? I know we're providing a lot of information, so feel free to ask any questions that come up.
I don't see any questions in the chat so far, and no raised hands.
Okay, so we can move on to the development process. And I'm going to leave my camera off here because I've been having some connection problems. Hopefully this will smooth things out. So there's really two steps to the septic to sewer connection program. The first part is where we are. We're on step 1, which is a community maybe is interested in the program, and DPW is going to come out and describe the program a little bit, the costs in general, and so that you have some information about what the program is and what the process is. And the next step would be for a community to turn in an application for a subsidy. And in that, the requirements aren't very rigorous. We need a community representative to be designated. We need confirmation of a project area map and an expression of interest from the community. So that can be an official letter from an HOA, but it can also just be going to the community webpage that DPW set up and notifying, just letting us know that you might be interested. And the reason we're using an application process is because we're going to be talking to a lot of different communities this year and in future application cycles. And we aren't going to be able to offer the subsidy to every community that might be interested. So we're going to be ranking the applications and then coming back. The top ranked communities will come back and we'll have a little more detailed meeting with updated costs. That's what Brian was talking about. And we'll take it to a conceptual engineering design level, and then we can firm up the costs a little bit, and we'll have a follow-up meeting with the community. At that point, that's step 3 on this diagram. After that point, the next step would be for the community to enter our formal petition process. And that's really that step, community votes. I guess it's between step 3 and 4, sorry. But anyway, the formal petition process is when the community, there's kind of more forms to fill out, and it's the process where the community is officially requesting extension of public sewer. At that point, we do additional engineering studies to get to what we would call a preliminary schematic design phase. And we would come back to the community for a formal vote, and based on a rate, based on what our projection of what that assessment is going to be. And that's step 4 when there's a formal vote. And then if it proceeds at that point, we would complete the design and move towards construction. So in the formal petition process, the majority of the community, so 50%, needs to be in favor of it. At the point where we are now, which is just the information and the application stage, we don't need a 50% approval rating from the community. We just want to see if there's enough interest in the community that we should rank this community against some of the other expressions of interest that we have. So next slide. So I guess we're kind of opening this up to questions at this point. I think, and what we have on the slide are a couple of different types of questions that we've received from other people. I think what I can probably mention is in terms of connection trigger. If a community goes all the way through the formal petition process, at the time that the work is completed everybody in the community would need to connect. So you only need 50% approval to move forward with it, but it's 100% of the community needs the connection. There's a few exceptions that can be granted to the connection time, but that's an important feature of the petition process, is that after the county's put all the infrastructure in, all the residents have to connect that are in the project area. Another question we received before are what happens to your existing your existing septic systems. The septic system that's there now would have to be abandoned. There's regulations on the health department's website about that. And that cost is part of those on-site costs that Brian showed, earlier in the slides.
And George, if I may interject here, we do have a question in the chat. The
Sure.
question from Kathy, and she wants to know, at what point would a household know what their individual costs would be?
So I can try to answer some of this. At what point would someone know what the individual cost would be? So for the assessment for the public side work, that assessment is going to be equal for all the properties in the project area. So the public side cost. The way that assessment is calculated is all the projects. So we do the construction cost. It turns into the project cost, and then we add the financing charge, and that's divided. Then that number is then divided equally amongst all the properties in the project. So that public side cost we'd have some certainty, or at least a fairly good certainty at the time of the petition vote. The final assessment is always based on the final cost. So when we were to come for a petition vote after our schematic design, we're presenting based on our construction cost estimate at that time. If the costs come in a little bit lower than that final assessment would be based on those lower costs. On the private side costs, since they are very site specific, we wouldn't really be able to provide a lot of guidance on what that particular number would be, other than the information that we showed a little bit earlier, which is that the costs are frequently between $3,000 to $6,000, except there's another kind of pocket when people have sort of adverse topography, or they're really far from the lot where their costs run high. So you wouldn't find out your private side costs until you met with the plumber and had him or her take a look at what needs to be done in your specific location.
Can you go back one slide? Just it helps emphasize what George was just talking about.
Yes. I did want to clarify something, George. Would it be accurate to say that the more people who participate, the cheaper it would be for everyone?
Yes, that's true. And that's because there's an economy of scale with different projects. So when I had mentioned at the beginning the project area that we showed in the early slide, I forget how many homes it was. It's a pretty large area. And I said it doesn't necessarily have to be that size, because the community would decide, or a subset of the community would decide whether they're interested or not. But generally, the larger the project, the less the costs are per individual house because of the economy scale.
Thank you.
And just one point on the timing, as George said, it's step 4 is really when you know the cost. That vote will be on a certain assessment, and you would know it at that time. That is the commitment point for the community. The first steps 1, 2, and 3, you're really only committing to finding out more and getting more information about the process.
Yes, and actually, you would, looking at this diagram, where you would find out your the private side, what we would call the private side cost would be here at step 5, when the resident's talking to a master plumber about their on-site improvements.
We do have another question in the chat. Based on the county having done this in other communities, what is a homeowner's typical average bottom line to do this conversion?
So, I guess on one, I'll answer it, I guess, on 2 tracks. On one track, we haven't had a large number of sewer petition projects go forward because of the cost factors, and that's one of the things that, in terms of designing the changes to the program, that we were trying to do was make it more affordable. We tend to have a limited number of water system petitions that have gone forward. Water lines are typically cheaper to install because they're shallower, because they're pressurized lines, and they tend to be smaller in diameter. So the water line petitions have more often gone forward than the sewer petitions. But in terms of what we think the ballpark costs are going to be, this slide that Ricky has brought up here is basically where we think the numbers are right now. Now, we would, if the community is interested and we do an application and we do a conceptual engineering evaluation, we'll refine these numbers a little bit, but this information here is kind of pulling together what we've seen, and I guess what we probably should clarify is, we haven't had a lot of connection projects. We've done a number of conceptual layouts and cost estimates for different areas, so we feel like we, at least on a preliminary conceptual level, we think we have an idea of where the costs are going to be, and that's the information that we're sharing. But as the program develops and hopefully we get communities to connect, we'll be able to update, our information with actual construction projects going forward. I hope that answers the question.
All right, it looks like no more questions so far in the chat right now. Okay, do have another comment. I thought that if over 50% residents of our community decide they wish to proceed, that all residents would have to tie into the sewer system. Is that correct?
It would depend. Yes, it's correct, but it also depends on what's defined as the project area. So if the entire community was defined as the project area, and 50% of the community voted in favor of the petition, then everyone would need to connect. In the possibility that maybe a certain street doesn't participate in the project, and they don't need to be included from an engineering standpoint, there's a possibility that the project area can be modified. And that's really where the community members probably need to be kind of sharing opinions amongst themselves about, the level of interest throughout the community. But once the formal petition process starts, that's when a defined project area is set up. All the homeowners are not notified if they're in the petition area, and then if 50% of that area goes forward, they would all have to connect if they're in the project area.
question? Okay, here's one more. What is the $3,000 to $6,000? Is that a cost after everything? I don't want to sign up for this and need to pay $20,000 or $40,000 out of my proceeds at closing when I sell.
So, do you think we can go back to the slide with the private and the website cost?
Yes.
So the reference to the $3,000 to $6,000 range was the cost range that we see, let's say, the most often for private side costs. And so and that ties back to I think my screen is freezing, but we have a slide that shows the public side improvements, which is the sewer main and the connection from the road out to a clean out in front of the homeowner's house near the road. And then there's private side costs, which is going to be the cost to decommission the septic system and reconfigure the piping in order to connect up to the public sewer. So the $3,000 to $6,000 that I had mentioned before is what we've seen in the data that we have as the kind of most often range for the private side improvements. The other part of the question, which was about the $20,000 or the $10,000 due at the time that the house is sold, that's related to the type of deferment that individual would. Okay, so there's the historical private side cost. So this is based on information we have about what the private site costs have been at different locations. And the most common numbers are there between the 3,000 and the 6,000, or maybe the 2,000 to 6,000 range. And then in certain circumstances, it's much more costly in the $14,000 range. The other cost, can you go to the deferment slide? The one that has the table. So how much, if you went forward with the project, then how much would you do at the time of the transfer would be related to what type of deferment you had chosen, if any.
The deferment is optional, so if you did not want to have that money tied up for the closing, you could select not to defer anything. And then you would have a larger assessment each year.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd rather not use WebEx for the simple reason I'm liable to have a computer crash. I live in Rolling Knolls. I have just a few questions. I'll give you the questions, and then you can answer them in whatever order you want. From my own experiences working with underground storage tanks, are we going to have to remove the septic tank within an abandoned septic tank within 1 year, as with the RECRA Subtitle B, which you would use for underground tanks? That is one question, and the cost for that. Another question here, sir, would be this. This is, now please correct me if I'm wrong, but having this upgrade to an actual sewer system instead of septic should raise the assessed valuation of the home and thereby increase property taxes. And I think the other question I had is there any information as to how much this typically might add to the sale price of a home, given the fact that some people are understandably skittish about having a septic tank and would be willing to pay more for a hookup to the sewer? Thank you.
I can try to answer these. So with respect to the septic system, tank. There are requirements for decommissioning it on the health department site. In most cases, it involves basically just abandoning the tank in place, and it's filled with rubble. So it doesn't have to be treated as a underground storage tank.
Thank you.
Which we were mentioning. The property tax increase. We're not really in a position to speak to that because I think the property taxes are set by the state, and so I'm not really sure if they change that that tax. I know we talked about it, the state property tax assessment, if that's changed due to the change in sewer service. And with respect to the property value, we've gotten this question a few times. I mean, we've seen a little bit of information that indicates the property values could go up, but we're really not. It's not really our field of expertise. So we would say probably it's maybe better to talk to a realtor association or something associated with that. We wouldn't want to make any, promises, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
And George, we do have a question related to petitioning. Is there a county method for petitioning and determining majority, or is that up to each community?
I'll go ahead and address that one if you want.
Sure.
So we do have a method for petitioning, and determining what that area is up to the community. However, we do often meet with the community because, you can't skip over certain houses, and there's certain requirements that the engineering group's going to need in order to make the project work. So as long as that whatever is submitted includes what is needed in order to have a viable project, then we do not determine that. We can edit that or suggest that other people be included if need be, but ultimately this is not the county making the decision to come in and put this into your neighborhood. It's up to the community to make that decision.
May I ask a relevant question regarding that?
Certainly.
Sure.
Okay, the question is, they talk about 50%. Is that 50% of the homeowners or 50% of the respondents? Because my guess is you'll get a lot of people that won't even bother to vote on this.
So it is 50% of the total number of properties that are included in the project.
Thank you.
And if there's no response, it's counted as a no. So you have to answer affirmatively yes for it to count as a yes.
Does anyone have any other questions?
So we submit questions via email online?
Are you referring to general questions about the Our Water program?
No, I'm talking about this particular issue here.
I believe if someone was able to get to the community webpage, they could submit a comment. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So we had set up through the Our Water website, we'd set up a community webpage for Rolling Knolls, and maybe next.
I put that in the chat again.
Okay, and if you go there, it'll have a copy of the slides that we just went through. Later this week, it'll have a copy of the recording of this meeting. So if you're talking to a neighbor and they can type in their address, they can get to this webpage. There's also a box there to say whether you're interested, I think, or not interested. and also to leave a comment. So you could, probably the easiest way to leave a question specific to, sort of the Rolling Knolls community might be to go to that webpage and submit through the comment box.
Thank you.
And George, before we get too far into Q&A, I did want to take a moment to get some feedback about the ease of this presentation. Knowing that we are in this virtual environment, we do want to take steps to make sure that the information is clear and accessible. So, I'm going to introduce a few poll survey questions.
Yes, we would appreciate feedback on this, because this is our first public information meeting about the program, and I think this might be our first time with this format too. So we are kind of curious to see how it's been from the residents' perspective.
And Rakia, while that poll's open, and hopefully everybody can see it and can enter. I know there's some people on the phone and may not be on the WebEx or had it crash your computers.
That's my fear. That's why I'm doing it this way.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to read out the website address. It's pretty easy. It's a bit.ly website, so it's bit.ly/Rolling Knolls Community. All one word.
Thank you, Brian. George, if you'd like, you can continue explaining the next steps while these poll questions are open.
Okay. Is there a slide that goes with this, or is? Okay. So the next step then would be for the community to submit an application, and I kind of mentioned this briefly a while back. Is really the application just is a couple pieces: a community name. We would need a primary contact person and a secondary contact person. So that's someone that we would be trying to communicate with about the project. What we would send the community representative would be the project area map and ask them to confirm that is the area. And then we mentioned an initial show of community support. And there's, again, a couple ways we can do this. We might, if the community has a formal HOA and the HOA wants to write a letter saying they're interested, that's a show of community support. As I mentioned before, when you go to the community webpage, you can indicate on the box whether you're submitted, and we'll be keeping a tab of the feedback that comes on there. And we were also planning just to at the end of today's meeting, if we could just get an idea of, from the information that you've heard, do you think you're interested or not? So sort of a straw poll. One thing we want to mention too is the application process is not binding. I think Brian had mentioned that earlier. This isn't a binding commitment from the community. The application process is really just for us to, get a specific community listed that we can kind of rank it, put it in with our ranking systems, and then determine where we should be trying to offer the subsidy for the upcoming year. We haven't, since we're just starting the process, this is our first application cycle, and as I mentioned, this was our first informational meeting. So the application window, so to speak, will probably be open up until somewhere around September would be my guess, or the end of August. We have quite a few more meetings to go through, so there's plenty of time to talk to your neighbors or talk to your HOA representative to see if there's some interest in the community, or maybe get people to come and look at some of the information that we presented tonight.
There is an additional question related to the assessment and cost.
Okay.
Question is there an additional charge on top of the assessment to use the sewer system? So would it be $1,000 to $2,000 per year for the assessment plus a usage fee, or just the $1,000 to $2,000 assessment yearly?
So in terms of the general numbers that we've presented earlier, Brian, you can correct me if I'm off track on this, but the 1,000 to 2,000 estimate includes the water, what would we projected for your typical water bill?
The sewer portion of
sewer
portion of your water bill, yes.
Now,
which is about $420 a year.
But when you're actually, if that project is constructed, and then say 5 years from now, you will see those charges separately. You will see the assessment as, I think it comes in with the does it come in, maybe Kim, you can help me, does it come in with the property bill?
So it's a separate bill. So there will be one bill that comes that's sent out every January for the assessment portion. And then the usage fee would be on your water bill that you're currently receiving every quarter.
So the number we're showing tonight, we're trying to aggregate those two to give you an idea. But when you're actually getting billed, they'll come separately.
I have an unusual question. For someone like myself that is classified by both DOD and the VA as a 100% disabled veteran, Maryland's one of the double-digit number of states that says we don't have to pay property taxes. So I'll still wind up getting a separate bill for this, correct?
So this is not considered a property tax. It's considered an assessment. So it would not meet that requirement. However, the 100% deferral option may be, based on the disability status, may be an option to where you would not pay that, but it would be deferred until you sold the property.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Was this our last slide, Kim? I guess it was. Okay. So overall, the next step would be for the community to submit an application, and for that, we encourage you to talk amongst yourselves and decide if this seems like something that the community is interested in, and if so, what areas are interested, and what who might be willing to serve as the community contact for this. And you can reach out back to us through the Our Water program, and we'll accept the application, and then we'll rank it, and then we'll be back with further information later on. I believe that's all we had for tonight. So I guess if there's no additional questions, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I know it's dinner time for everyone, but we appreciate you taking some time out to join us tonight.